I'll start off by saying that this isn't my story. It's a messed up experience from when my older cousin, Dylan, was just a kid. He told me about this recently, and I'll be writing it from his point of view moving forward. I think everyone has memories from their childhood that bother us. I'm 24 years old now, but this is something that I'll never forget. When I was in elementary school, I did what was called the Extended Day Program. It was essentially a daycare after school for kids whose parents worked late. This happened to me when I was in second grade, and I was 7 years old at the time. My parents worked late on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. My older sister, Alyssa, had a part-time job at McDonald's. Usually my parents would come pick me up, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, my sister would pick me up at around 4:30, which was an hour and a half after school ended. It was a chilly day in March. We were on the playground, just messing around. It was about 4:10, when the teacher who was watching us on the playground, Mr. McCann, told me that I was going home. He walked me back into the school, where I grabbed my stuff and walked out to the lobby. There, I met a young woman who was no older than 30. She was skinny, about 5'2", and had long dark hair with tan skin, a pointy nose, and a lot of makeup on, topped off with a nose ring and a tattoo on her left arm. She knelt down and asked me if I was Dylan. And me being a dumb kid, I said yes. She introduced herself as Heather. She told me that she worked with my sister, and she was here to pick me up, since apparently my sister had to work extra late that night. A side note, she never actually mentioned my sister by name. This will be important later on. Anyway, she took my hand, and we walked out to her car together. And obviously, I didn't think anything of it. No alarm bells were going off in my head yet, because again, I was just a dumb kid. When we got to her car, Heather offered me M&Ms. I thought she was being nice, so I ate them. And I know what most of you are probably thinking, but luckily they turned out to be normal M&Ms. At first, nothing seemed off. Heather took me down the same ways that my parents and my sister would always take me to and from school. It wasn't until she passed my street by that I started to realize that something was off. I told her that we passed by my street, but she just responded by saying, "Okay," and kept going down the main road. She no longer had that caring, friendly tone that she had when I met her less than 30 minutes before. She seemed cold, and not really caring about how nervous I was. I asked her if she could get me a Happy Meal, and she responded by yelling at me, "Shut up, kid!" After a couple of minutes of silence, I then asked another question, and her answer terrified me. "So are you and Alyssa friends?" Who's Alyssa? My heart and lungs dropped to the pit of my stomach. Even as a kid, I knew that this meant I was in serious danger. I started crying, afraid of what was going to happen next. Heather kept screaming for me to shut up and even reached over and slapped me a couple of times. Eventually, she got so fed up with me, she pulled over, put the car in park, and pulled a roll of duct tape from the center console. Then, just like in an action movie, a police car pulled up behind us just in time. Heather dropped the duct tape, put the car in drive, then floored it down the road. The speed limit was 30, but she had to be going at least 60, maybe even 70. This lasted for about 5 minutes. I kept crying as Heather floored it down the road, taking turns at ridiculous speeds. We soon came upon 2 police cars blocking the road. Heather slammed on the brakes, sliding to a stop just before she hit one of the police cars. She got out and started running, but luckily the cops were able to stop her before she took off into the forest alongside the road. As Heather was taken into custody, one of the police officers took me home in his car. When I got home, Alyssa was sobbing, and as soon as she saw me, she hugged me for about 2 minutes straight. My parents arrived home shortly after. They had heard about what happened and were both pretty upset. That night, they had a very long talk with me about stranger danger. The police came back later and checked in on us and asked me a few more questions. It turns out that Heather was not the woman's real name, and she had no connection to my sister whatsoever. And even though I had no idea at the time, the woman's ex-boyfriend was on trial for child pornography and sex trafficking. What still confuses me about this is how Heather knew who I was. Keep in mind that I was only 7, and this happened before social media really took off. I do have a theory though. Mr. McCann, the teacher that ran the after-school program, was fired after this incident. I saw on the news many years later that he had been charged with molesting a student at another school. He ended up taking his own life before he stood trial. I think there's a chance that both he and Heather are connected, but I have no proof of that, and I'll never know for sure. To all the kids out there listening, please be careful with strangers, and always listen to your parents when they warn you about the dangers of the world. To all the parents, for the love of God, teach your kids about stranger danger. Hopefully Heather is either in jail or got some kind of help, and she'll never try to harm another kid ever again. This happened a while ago. I have since been diagnosed with PTSD because of this incident. I'm currently on medication to suppress the recurring nightmares. For some background, at the time I was only 9 years old. I am a female from Georgia. My mother met my stepfather at a church we recently started attending with her best friend. When this happened, they were just dating. It was a fairly normal church for the most part. It was a somewhat run-down building with an outdated interior and an old basement. The pastor was an ex-drug addict turned man of God, who was honestly one of the nicest people I've ever met. It was a cold winter night. Saturday church service had just ended. We left the church and headed towards my mom's old Pontiac Vibe. It was the kind of car that didn't have electric locks or windows. Each door had to be locked and unlocked on its own. We sat in the parking lot talking for some time. Since my stepfather lived in a different city back then, he and my mom wanted to maximize their time together. They were discussing upcoming holiday plans when I noticed a figure wearing a green coat moving between the cars parked nearby. I didn't think anything of it at the time, as it could have been our pastor or another churchgoer. My stepdad got into the passenger seat, and we were about to take off when his door was suddenly pulled open. There was a man in a green hoodie that none of us recognized. He had dark skin, bloodshot eyes, and a shaved head. He looked completely deranged. He shoved a gun into my stepdad's abdomen. "Give me your wallet!" he demanded. Mind you, my stepfather is a Hispanic man. He speaks English well now, but he wasn't fluent back then, and he had a thick accent. So he simply responded to the man, "No." My mom began freaking out. I was so scared that I kept trying to get out of the car. I started crying because my mom told me to stay put. Then the man began screaming, "I said give me your wallet!" But my stepdad stood firm. "No." The man then directed his attention at my mother. "Tell him I said to give me his wallet." Thinking that he couldn't understand him, my mother tried to get my stepdad to comply, but he refused. I'm looking frantically through our fogged-up windows, trying to find someone to get their attention. But the man looked at me, then back to my mom. He then hit my stepdad with his gun, causing him to lean forward. He then pointed the gun at me, a 9-year-old girl in a pink and black dress who was talking about Christmas dinner just 5 minutes before. "Somebody better give me something, or she dies." I lost it. I got out of my seat and exited the car. That's when I saw 2 other hooded men across the parking lot. They were walking towards the car, also carrying guns. I started screaming and immediately got back in the car. My mom yelled at me for getting out, and the man with the gun was still screaming at my stepdad. "Are you listening to me, man? I'm going to shoot her right between the fucking eyes!" My mom then offered him all the cash she had on her. She handed him $75 from her wallet. The man ripped away the cash from her, then assaulted my stepdad again with his gun. The mugger then slammed his arm against the car door to close it, but in the process the gun went off. The bullet went into the well of my mom's car. The three men ran off into the night. We sat there crying and trying to console each other. After about 30 minutes, we calmed ourselves down and left. We immediately went to the police station and filed a report. They said it was most likely gang activity, and it would be very difficult to track down the perpetrators. The men could have killed my stepfather right in front of my mother. There was no justice. I was only a child when this happened. It's been 13 years, and I still wake up screaming and sweating from the nightmares. I'm just glad that my mom had her grocery money on her that day. Heaven knows what would have happened if she didn't. At the time of this story, my close friend and I were in our late 20s. We became roommates and moved into a new apartment in the Greater Toronto area. It was a great neighborhood, with low crime rates and lots of tourists. Not a bad place at all. The building was in great shape, but very old, and many of the tenants have told us that they've been there for over 20 years. We were assured that the locks were changed before we moved in. There was a maintenance guy who took care of the building, who was in his late 60s. I was the last to leave the apartment. It was around 8 a.m., and I locked the door behind me. My roommate got home that day at 4:30 p.m., changed, and then left again to go run errands. We both arrived back at the apartment around 6 p.m. The first thing I did was go to my room and change out of my work clothes and put on some yoga pants. I then noticed that my closet looked a bit messy. It caught my attention because I'm very much a type A personality. My belongings looked out of place. Some items were laying on the closet floor, while others looked like they had been placed into incorrect storage containers. Furthermore, it looked like somebody had gone through my dirty laundry and tossed the clothes out of their way, which is probably what caused the box full of stuff to fall in the first place. Because I'm a very tidy person, I knew right away that this was not right. The thought crossed my mind that my roommate might be responsible, but I've known her for a long time. There was no way that she would do this. If she ever needed anything from me, she would ask. Fast forward to 9:45. I'm in my room, and all of a sudden, I hear my roommate call my name loudly. So I got up to see what was wrong. I found the gift you left me. What? The present you left in my pillow. I just stared at her. I had no idea what she was talking about. Then I saw something on her bed. It was a dildo. My dildo. I grabbed it and said, "Hey, that's mine." "Well, what the fuck is it doing in my bed? I found it in my pillow. You didn't put it there?" Fuck no. It was supposed to be stored in my closet." Now the wheels started turning, and things were coming together. Someone must have entered our apartment, went into my room, looked through my dirty laundry, and found the sex toy in one of the storage boxes, then put it inside my roommate's pillowcase, so she would find it when she went to bed. After being in shock for a few minutes, the reality sunk in. There were no signs of forced entry. The intruder likely entered with a key. We decided to talk to the building managers. They were an old couple who lived in the same building. They seemed concerned and clearly saw that I was an emotional wreck. But the husband tried to play it down, saying that it was probably just a joke, and then asked us if we gave anyone a copy of the apartment key. Stupid question. Since the husband was a frail old man with cancer, I truly believed that he had no involvement. We decided to call the cops, and they came within an hour or so. I told them the whole story, and they took all of our info. But honestly, there wasn't much that they could do, and I figured as much, but at least we had a paper trail. I definitely mentioned the maintenance man as someone that they should question. I'm convinced that the intruder either had to be a staff member or someone who had access to the apartment keys. as of the writing of this story, there has been literally no word from the cops. The good news is I don't believe that anyone has been in our apartment since that day. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of Based on True Events. If you enjoyed these narrations and would like your story to be featured in this series, please send in your written experience to unit522stories@outlook.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, I'm your Uncle Unit, and as always, never forget, there's always